Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Gyani Richards, who is joining me from Fairfax, California, with a Master's of Arts in Transpersonal Counseling Psychology, a second-degree black belt in Aikido, and certification as a grief educator. Gyani brings a unique blend of discipline, compassion, and insight into his work. He describes himself not as a fixer, but as a guide and companion on the grief journey, creating a space where body, heart, and mind can be transformed. When Gyani was just 13 years old, his father passed away, a moment that broke open his world and set him on a lifelong path of exploration. In the wake of that loss, Gyani turned toward meditation and the great wisdom traditions, immersing himself in practices that have guided him for more than 40 years. Gyani believes that grief is one of the deepest spiritual practices we can encounter because it arises from the deepest parts of who we are. He has come to see grief as carrying seeds of transformation, seeds that blossom most fully in a climate of heartful witnessing. I'm looking forward to talking with Gyani about the timeless principles of mindfulness that can guide us through grief, the unexpected gifts hidden within the grieving process, and how Gyani guides others to access their inner strength. We'll also explore why healing is inseparable from our growth and evolution, how it connects to our very birthright, and more. This will surely be an enlightening and heartfelt conversation filled with many important insights. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, Gyani. A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Good morning, Irene. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. It's such a pleasure to meet you and to know you and to talk with you today. So I want to start with having you explain to people what the heck is transpersonal counseling psychology. I'm hearing more and more now that people are starting to get degrees in this, but it's a blend of modalities and all, isn't it?
Yeah, basically, Irene, transpersonal psychology developed really late 60s, early 70s, and really began to emerge into the culture, probably mid to late 70s. And essentially what transpersonal philosophy or transpersonal counseling is, in my case, is academically, it is a blend of more conventional psychological training. And the other piece is what we could call the contributions of the great wisdom traditions, the spiritual traditions. And so it's really a psychology that honors both the mind, but as well as our body and soul. So it's an integrative approach to looking at a human being.
I think that's fascinating because I think a lot of people are in their heads. And I've been in therapy and it's, and it helps a lot and it's talking all, but this adds this other dimension that could be so helpful for people.
Yeah, transpersonal psychology, again, essentially honors that we are much larger than this body-mind thing that's having this conversation, and we're part of a larger ocean of whatever you would like to call that, existence, source, God, divinity. And so transpersonal psychology honors that is, or holds that is sort of the isness of this human plane. And so when we work with people and when we look at life that way, we hold it with a much more expanded perception rather than just we're little minds and little bodies running around.
I love that. I love that. So when someone's working with you, they get the whole package, not just like one slice. So, right? So let's talk about how you got into this. It started with the loss of your father when you were 13 years old. And how did this open your world and set you on a lifelong path of exploration instead of like just drowning in your sorrow?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because so when my dad died at 13, I was part of a family, mom, dad, and 5 brothers. And so obviously that level of tragedy really explodes the entire family system. And when I look back on that, and I've had many decades to look back on that, I often wonder how we each made it through that transition. None of us were doing formal therapy or formal practice, but through grace, through community, through family, we made it through. Not untouched, not unwounded, but each of us went on to live our lives. For me personally, when I look back on that, 4 or 5 years later, I think what began to marinate inside of me, which ultimately led me to India to study with a meditation teacher and kind of launch my life in that way,
Wow.
was sort of this search, if you will, for something that couldn't be taken. My dad was just taken. So something at the soul level was like, well, is there anything else here that's beyond the physical material world? And so it's always hard to draw those causal lines, but somewhere in my young soul and psyche, it said, no, look here, move here. And 4 or 5 years later, I had thrown myself into studying meditation and yoga and going to India. And that was really the life arc that grief tragedy had sort of catapulted me on.
Wow. Did your dad, was he ill?
Yes, my dad died from cancer. He was 45.
That's so young.
Very young. Yeah, and the brothers were between about 12 and 22,
You were 13.
and I was 13. I was one of the younger 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How'd your mom do with all of that? That's a lot.
Unbelievable strength. I mean, my mom is no longer with us now, but when I look back on that, I still can't in any way sort of mentally figure out how that one incredible woman held the family together and made it through. She'd never worked before. She was back in the 50s and 60s, a housewife with lots going on and sending kids off to soccer practice. And then my dad died. And so there was mom sort of holding this whole thing together. And she did it in an incredibly powerful and amazing way.
She gave you a gift because she role modeled for you a really wonderful way to cope with something like this. And for you also, you were learning, when you started learning and practicing meditation, you discovered that timeless principles of mindfulness can guide us through grief. So you want to tell us a little bit about that because you launched into this whole.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. At times when these grand intersections happen, it's often many months or years later that we look back and go, oh, that's what was kind of cooking at that time. So at the time, I wasn't necessarily consciously aware that I was beginning to practice meditation as a path of healing for my grief. But meditation and grief are actually perfectly aligned for each other in this one simple but profound way, which is the practice of mindfulness and meditation helps us develop the capacity to hold the intensity and the enormity of what grief has us bear witness to. And without training and practice, our entire system, as we all know, just explodes and goes crazy. That's the natural response of a nervous system when deep loss occurs. So my whole orientation toward mindfulness and meditation as a healing path to grief is that it provides a larger space and ground in which we can hold and learn from this incredible pathway that has been given to us, not by our choice. Nobody goes looking for deep grief, but as you know, when it shows up, you have the choice to respond toward healing or away. And hopefully we chose the one toward healing.
Well, I love what you're saying because when people go into deep grief, they think this is all there is. And you're telling them they can look at it as, okay, what are the nuggets here? How am I going to grow and how am I going to evolve through this pain and through this experience that I'm having, which is a totally different way than most people look at it. Like, right? So,
Yeah. I think grief is really one of the most, as I mentioned before, because it comes from the deepest part of us, our deep heart, our deep soul. When it arrives, it reveals so much about the architecture of who we are and the anatomy of our inner world. And most of us, just because we're human, we don't have much training in how to attend to that. It's just, we're just never taught how to do that. We learn it along the way, hopefully. But it's better to start earlier so you're ahead of the game and you put your reps in, so to speak, so that when these huge life events happen, in any sort of loss could be a death of a beloved, it could be a loss of our physical, financial security, the loss of a pet. My son left for college a few years ago. That was a huge loss. So all of these losses can be held in this deeper way if we have some practice behind us.
and what is this thing about heartful witnessing that you say is the gift and opportunity hidden within the grief experience?
Yeah, I think in the grief world, this, is that grief needs to be witnessed. And my take on that, my personal and professional take on that is grief wants to be seen. It wants to be heard. It wants to be grokked because the cultural conditioning is don't do that. The cultural conditioning is toward a posture of isolation. And isolation on top of grief makes things way more complicated and way more painful. So a lot of the work is about helping and supporting people to allow their grief to be witnessed by themselves and by others, with me and by close members
I
of the
think that's great
community.
because you kind of take them out of the deep, deep pain and give them a higher view in a way, right? That they're witnessing their experience.
Yes, yes, yes. Witnessing, from a higher place, but also witnessing from a very human place, from a place of, in this moment, this is how my grief is taking shape. This is how my heart feels. This is how my body feels. This is the thought stream. All of those things give shape to our grief. And grief, I think, as an entity, it is us, but grief wants to be shared that way. It wants to feel like, I see grief almost as a phenomena that wants to breathe. It needs to respire. In breath, out breath, ebb and flow. And bearing witness to grief helps us do that deeply.
Mm. How is grief a deep spiritual practice to you? And that it arises from the deepest parts of who we are. And the other question I want to throw into that is you also talk about meditation with mindfulness and practicing that, but body-based wisdom also. So you mix body-based wisdom, compassionate dialogue to help people deal with their grief. And then you're saying it's arising from this deep place of who we are. So you want to expand upon that a little bit?
Sure, sure. If we hold the assumption, the observation that as humans we are a unique mix of body, mind, and soul, and each of us has this absolutely what I call snowflake unique mix of those three ingredients. And so when deep loss occurs, it jiggles that, it upsets that entire inner ocean. And a primary part of that inner ocean is our body, is our somatic experience. As someone said, the issues are in the tissues. When I said that,
Oh, I love that. That's cool.
because grief and loss, as love, let's remember, grief and love are commingled energies in our deep heart. And when we're deeply touched by love or deeply touched by grief, our body responds, our bellies, our hearts, our muscles, our sinews. And so part of the support and part of the practice is helping people move from the neck down. Typically in traditional psychotherapy, it can become a very head up sort of experience, which, as you mentioned, can be helpful. We talk, we see, we dialogue. But I think a deeper way to honor the depth and the opportunity of grief is to allow our experience to drop down. I use a metaphor of taking the elevator down a couple of floors And then we begin to embody, oh, there's actually grief in my belly. Oh, it feels in my back. It's a very visceral, palpable experience. So it helps us expand the way that we can hold it and eventually heal it.
Okay, so now someone comes to you and they're grieving tremendously, and you're offering yourself as a guide and a companion on their grief journey. How do you inspire them? They're crying their eyes out and they're really upset, and you're inspiring them to access their inner strength, their inner resources, deal with patience, trust, courage they didn't even know they had. And it's gonna lead to transformation. Can you give us a little
Sure.
picture?
So I think the first invitation is we need to slow down and begin to allow any time frame that we have about the healing time frame to dissolve and sort of become irrelevant. Because as you and I know, it really is irrelevant. The stages and the tiers and the levels and the time frames, our culture has embedded us kind of mythically with so many, I feel, unhelpful time frames about grief. It's 6 months, it's a year, 2 years, shouldn't you be over it? So a part of it is in the beginning, allowing people to tell their grief story. That's the first piece, bearing witness. Tell me who your beloved was. Tell me about your loss. And grief begins to slowly reveal itself in this dialogue that we have. And over time, people begin to see and drop into these deeper places of themselves, and they can access what I call innate qualities, because as humans, as unique humans, we all have curiosity. We all have trust. We all have patience. We all have courage. Unfortunately, don't spend a lot of time developing those, but grief gives us that opportunity because the grief path will require that we need each and every one of those qualities to slowly, as I like to say, braille our way with baby steps along our grief path.
That's wonderful. I love I'll bet you that when you work with people, they discover parts of themselves they were never ever in touch with,
Hmm.
right? It's like a wonderful discovery, in a way, a wonderful discovery that they're a package and all of these other parts are there because they probably spent a lot of time in their heads.
Yeah, very much. And Irene, the other thing that I notice with everyone who walks through the door is that even amongst our closest friends and our closest family members, the grief, the bearing witness to grief component is still kept very private and very isolating. And so when people come in, they say, I can't even really talk about the depth of my loss and my pain with my spouse or my best friends. And no shame, no blame. It's just that our culture hasn't trained us and sort of taught us that's the healing direction, allowing this breath of grief to inhale and exhale. And so with little steps, we begin to do that. And it begins to reorient them in the direction of healing.
Sounds great. And I just want to ask you, because I know you lost your younger brother 4 years ago. How did you practice what you preach with your brother and his death, which was so disorienting for you? And how did you turn grief into your friend and ally during this your immense grieving path?
Yeah. My younger brother, Pete, died about 4.5 years ago from cancer, like my dad. He was 63.
Was it the same type of cancer, Gyani?
Different,
Different.
different type of cancer. He was arguably my closest brother of the five in age and in heartful connection. We were just a couple years apart. And that was an incredible loss. It was, if for those watching and for you, if you have brothers or sisters, to lose someone, it seems like each loss has its own flavor. Losing a spouse, losing a brother, losing a parent, they each have a unique way of opening this grief portal. And when I lost my brother, it was so rearranging, so out of left field, because he was so healthy and he was just the sign of health and played tennis. But then 1 year got diagnosed, and within a year and a half, he was gone. And fortunately, the part of the silver lining, if we can talk about loss having a silver lining, was that I had had decades of training, both in mindfulness and meditation practice, a couple of decades practicing a Japanese martial art called Aikido, which is essentially a moving meditation. So all of these practices helped me develop already as sort of a pre-existing condition, a way to hold this loss. It was still absolutely deeply, deeply painful and deeply disorienting. But I felt like the container that I had built over decades could hold it in a way that I probably couldn't have before.
Oh, that's great. Not only that, though, when people come to you, you've already done this yourself too. So it's not like you're practicing you practice what you preach in a way.
100%. Hopefully we practice what we preach. Otherwise, it doesn't have legs.
Right? So let me ask you a question. How has your experience with grief evolved over the years? And looking back, what would you tell your 13-year-old self? What advice would you offer to that little kid who lost his dad?
Wow, that's a great question, Irene. I would look back and tell that young 13-year-old young man, boy, to trust the process, that you will not be in this life-shattering pain forever. The most important thing you can do now is to attend to your grief and to your sorrow, to turn towards it, not away. Be patient and have incredible mercy on yourself. Self-compassion and self-kindness are probably at the top of the list of many qualities that are the essential resource. So I would tell my young 13-year-old, trust that you will evolve, you will open into brighter days, and spend your time holding, trusting, and sending love and kindness to yourself.
That in itself is a wonderful, wonderful lesson to people. Really, Gyani. So you also say that healing is inseparable from our growth and evolution. Now we're singing my tune about healing and how it connects to our very birthright. Would you like to tell us the Gyani interpretation of that? Why is healing inseparable from our growth and evolution? So people who are not healing are in one spot, and those of us who are healing are transiting to another spot?
Yeah, I feel like when we get born, just to sort of have back to our word, a transpersonal perspective of this, which means kind of a holistic perspective. Getting born, Irene, I think gives us the opportunity to learn as much as we can about this curriculum of what is a human being? What is this incredible rainbow experience of mind, body, and soul? What are we doing here? And the grief and the joy, the sorrow, the celebration, the whole spectrum gives us, it seems, endless opportunities to wake up to our own ongoing answer to this question: who am I, and what is a human being, and what is our opportunity here? That's the seed. That's the soul seed.
That happened. And why do you say that at some point in our lives, hopefully sooner than later, it begins to dawn on us that our healing is really what being human is all about?
Yeah, like I just mentioned, I think to be a human being is to be an evolving being. I mean, even biologically, but certainly spiritually. And I think the opportunity to align, it's really this question of how deeply and closely and intimately can we align with the healing impulse? We come in as a seed that wants to heal and open and evolve. And I think a lot of our job, which sometimes is a difficult job and sometimes an incredible blissful job, but the job is to, how can I align with this evolution such that at the end of it, when I take my final breath, I can go, wow, I lived the entire rainbow human experience as best as I possibly could.
Right. And I've graduated, and here I am. Right? Do you have a special offer for our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience today?
I do, absolutely. If you've been touched, and if you feel that something about my conversation with Irene today has resonated with you in your heart and your mind, then feel free to reach out. I'll gladly offer a free half-hour consultation to see if it would be helpful to work with each other. 100%.
That's great. And we will leave links to the show notes and all of that for people. And how is true joy and allowing of something to truly and deeply touch us? And when we are grieving, how do we allow ourselves to receive that joy and also be open to letting joy find us? Because I know so many people close down.
Yes. I would say my experience is that grief and love originate from our precious, treasured human heart. And that the process of being with our grief and allowing our grief to open and to heal allows us more deeply to drop into this ground of heartfulness that we are. And the clouds of grief may come and go, but with our trust and our patience and our curiosity, that deep joy of being an alive, opportunity-filled human can arise more and more.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Gyani. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt thank you for this enlightening interview that has illuminated how mindfulness, body-based wisdom, and compassionate dialogue can help us meet grief in all its dimensions, mind, body, and heart. May you continue to inspire those who are grieving to trust the current, discover their inner resources, and find healing along the way. I thank you so much, and I wish you abundant blessings.
Thank you so much, Irene. It's been a great, great journey with you.
Thank you. As I like to say, to be continued.
To be continued.
Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon. Until next time, many blessings.